Hey, what's going on? Welcome back to another episode of the Mindshare podcast. This show is sponsored by Kits Keep In Touch Systems, a two-time international award-winning marketing suite for sales professionals, along with REM Real Estate Magazine, Canada's premier monthly magazine for real estate professionals. Learn more about our sponsors by visiting my site, mindshare101.com. And while you're there, be sure to download your free copy of my book, The Ultimate Marketing Bundle, as well as learn more about our one-to-one coaching and keynote speaking. Today's episode is number 237. He is a heart surgeon without a blade. He does not start outside with what you need to do. He starts inside with who you are. In a world that is disconnected, he is revolutionizing how individuals, leaders, and entrepreneurs deeply connect with their authentic selves to achieve the best version of themselves. His belief is that everyone's story is as important as his own and is what makes him one of the most accessible, relatable, and authentic individuals you will ever meet. As a human behavior and performance coach, speaker, and business strategist, he disrupts the normative approach on how to create sustainable growth and lasting change personally and professionally. Joining me on this episode of the Mindshare podcast is business strategist Brian Bogert. Brian, welcome to the Mindshare podcast.
What's up, brother? Dude, you've got like an announcer's voice on your podcast. It's like you go into a different cadence, different delivery. I feel like I'm being moved by the vibration. It's beautiful, bro. I'm happy to be here.
Buddy, listen, man, I'll tell you, I'm going to go right back to that same feeling when I spoke to you and first met you back in Dallas. And I went, dude, who's this guy? Right? Just taking over the room, making sure that everybody knows what's going on, but being able to obviously lend a ton of value. And that's, I mean, amongst the many reasons, one of the reasons I'm super pumped to have you on the show today. So thank you for making the time, man.
Dude, it's my pleasure. I've enjoyed all of our interactions, and I love being around good humans who are making impact on other people. So this is going to be fun, dude.
Well, man, listen, I'll tell you this. I know for anybody that hasn't yet, make sure that you check this guy out on Insta. Actually, Brian, what's and I've obviously got you on there, but what is it, Bogert Brian?
It's at Bogert Brian, Bogert, Brian with an I. Yep.
All right, cool. So here,
I'm
I'm just going to put
that
this
yesterday.
up.
Like, how come you didn't pick Brian Bogert? I was like, well, I was a late adopter, and somebody else cool got that, but they don't seem to have a big profile anyway. So I went with Bogert Brian, and it works out great.
Dude, I tried to get Mindshare 101. That was gone. Somebody actually took it, and the only photo they ever put up was one of my workbooks that they got from a conference. How tight is that? Right? So I had to take David Greenspan 101 because David Greenspan wasn't available anymore. Now, fast forward when YouTube came out with the whole like @ symbol, I got David Greenspan.
Oh,
yeah.
nice.
And then like 2 days before going to Jamaica, about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, was probably 3 weeks ago, we actually lost the whole YouTube channel. One of the biggest disappointments wasn't the hundreds of videos over 7 years and the followers and the views. It was the fact that I lost the @ David Greenspan, the legit on YouTube, but we ended up getting it back. So, dude, mindset is everything. We ended up getting the show back, or the channel back. It was just absolutely amazing.
Oh man,
so
that's rough. That can be really difficult, especially when these are on platforms that we don't have any control over, right?
Dude, and then not having anybody to communicate with, it makes it tough. But no, I was just saying though, for everybody, make sure you check this guy out. Follow him on Instagram. The handle's right up here on the screen as well for those of you that are live with us. But Brian, you and I had met. We met back in Dallas. We started talking, and over the course of a few hours, getting into good conversation, you looked at me and meant, man, what's wrong? And I kind of looked at you, and all I could think in my head is like, I just met this guy. How the hell does he know something's wrong? And that hit home for me because I had just suffered a concussion. And for anybody on this show or listening and that knows me, there's no fear of being in front of the room. There's no fear in speaking up, but I was not myself. You saw it like in a heartbeat. Didn't even know me from a hole in the wall. How did you know? And moreover, why did you even care?
You know what? I don't think I've been asked that in that way before so directly. That kind of gave me chills down my spine. I was like, what did I fuck something up? No, I'm kidding.
No, dude, it was very refreshing.
How did I know? I wish I could give you a really good answer for that. I've surrendered to the fact that I seem to have an ability to see things in people that don't necessarily make sense. I denied that for a big part of my life, and I shut it down. And I told myself that it was all crazy. But as I've leaned into the coaching element of what I do and really being able to help develop people and move through that over the last 8 to 10 years, I've realized how much a gift it really is, because it is one of the things that, you know, I've not met many people who feel seen and understood and deeply connected all the time, right? In fact, most people feel exactly opposite.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, I feel like I see people for who they are, exactly where they are, objectively and non-judgmentally. And so that filter and lens allows me to just really have empathy, grace, and compassion with people. And why do I care? I mean, I think that's probably the better question. I know what it's like to be isolated, disconnected, and alone. I know what it's like to suffer from shame, to have anger come out in my world that manifests as armor, that almost drove everything and everyone that I ever cared about away from me. Right? I've done a lot of deep internal work, and obviously we'll unpack certain portions of my story today, but
yes, we will.
I've been a practitioner of pain for a very, very long time. And one of our core concepts is this idea of embracing pain to avoid suffering, right? And for me, it's those moments when I'm with someone that I have to embrace the pain, to lean in and say something that might catch them off guard, that might cause them to pause in their tracks for just a second, to hopefully alleviate some of the suffering that they might be experiencing in the moment, because they're not being seen and understood. They're hiding, they're armored, they're disconnected in that moment. To me, it's a way to engage people. And if I look at our core mission, we're on a mission to impact over 1 billion lives as quickly as we can by reducing the level of suffering that exists on this planet. I believe suffering exists in 4 places, my friend. I believe it's in the things that are left unsaid, the things we lack permission to feel or say, the things we lack the words to articulate or understand, or the things that are left undone. My purpose in life is to allow my truth to give others permission to speak theirs and to live theirs. So in that moment, what did I do? I gave you permission to feel and say things that you didn't otherwise have an experience. And I gave you words to articulate and understand what you were experiencing, because I've had 8 concussions and I know some of the cognitive dysfunction. I know how much that can tap your nervous system. And I felt it. I saw it. And so I leaned in, because by me speaking to you, it alleviated some of your suffering in the time. And because I know how much suffering can drain us, how much it can disconnect us, how much it can deplete us, how much it can take us out of our power and potential. And I also know what's on the other side of that. Dude, and I'm just trying to bring as many people along with me as possible, brother.
You got the hair standing up on my shoulder, my arms again here. It's you know, look, to everybody tuned in, right? We titled this today, How Your Story Will Impact Millions. And as you listen to today's show, when we do dive deeper into Brian's story and you start to understand it, he just said he wants to impact billions, not just millions. And when you go to his Instagram, you're going to see that. And that's part of what I wanted to bring up there, was he's on a mission. And Brian, you are on a mission. And, you know, we talk about authenticity. We talk about transparency. You just nailed every single feeling, and you know it well. You're a professional at this. I mean, not only living it, but you've helped so many people with it. You hit it bang on, like sitting there in that room, unsure, uncomfortable, not myself. I was 48 hours removed from having my first concussion ever. Foggy, just not myself. You felt it, you leaned in and tried to help with it, or never mind tried, you helped with it. You asked a ton of questions. You asked stuff that boggled my mind and confused me a little bit. But yeah, coming out the other side, it was like there was this relief, this breath of fresh air of being able to just talk it out. And at the moment, a complete stranger. But dude, you tapped into that. And I remember you said something, and I don't know if I'm going to use the words the right way here. But you began to talk about the feelings. And you said, is it, and you'll say that, you'll correct me in the way I say this, right? But was it a physical or an emotional feeling? And I was like, what? Maybe correct on the words that I used there, but I was like, well, what's the difference? And you started explaining this thing like, are you feeling it or is it in your mind? And I was like, I sat there for a few minutes, and you actually even said, I think at one point, you said, listen, I'm going to get a coffee or something. I'll be right back. Hang out here. I'll be right back. Think about that. And I sat there outside, taking in the sun, going, what the fuck does this guy mean? But then it started to come together.
Yeah. Yeah, I genuinely believe, and I don't remember exactly the words I said to you. I'm one of those that sometimes even in a coaching session, someone will be like, "Can you repeat that?" And I'm like, "No, I can't."
What did I say?
Not the way it was supposed to the time that I did. But the concept that I was talking about with you in that moment is one that I believe deeply in, right? So I at least directionally know where I was going with that.
Yeah.
I genuinely believe that so many of us experience the world and learn at the deepest level through our physical experience. But we often are not paying attention to the intellectual and emotional narratives that are associated with it. And it's very easy to associate whatever we're going through as physical alone, even though I believe that we exist in 4 categories of self, right? Mindset, basically intellectual narratives, emotional narratives, physical self, and spiritual self, right? So mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. Those are the 4 categories that make all of us. And by the way, they are all interdependent on each other, but we often don't pay attention to it. And many of us who've operated in a high level of performance have learned how to live largely intellectually, right? So one of the questions I asked you is, I was like, what are you feeling right now?
Yeah.
And you couldn't really describe it at first. And then you went on, I don't remember the words, but it was around this, and correct me if it's wrong, but it was something around it's like, man, I just feel like heavy. I feel like this fog. I feel like I'm not myself. My head is spinning, but I also can't seem to calm down. You just were all over the place. And I said, okay, calm down. Physiologically, what's happening in your body? And you were like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. That's exactly
literally what's happening in your body. What's happening to your heart rate right now? What's happening to your respiration? What's happening to your blood pressure? What's happening to the tightness in your muscles? Get in your body, because your body will always point you what's important if you're paying attention, right? And particularly on the tail end of a physical injury, here's the truth. And I'll just bring the first part of my story into this, because I think it's really important. I experienced the world largely through physical elements alone for 20 to 25 years of my life. See, when I was a kid, I was run over by a truck and my left arm was completely severed from my body. It was reattached. I had 24 surgeries, years of adversity. And, a few things happened in that experience. One, I came out of the hospital and I've got a teddy bear in between my arm because the humerus had to heal at 90 degrees out in front of me. So inevitably I'd get asked all the time, what happened to you? Right? Because this was months that I was in this sling. And most people were expecting me to be like, man, I was racing my brother down the street on our bikes and I crashed, but I beat him, right? Or man, I flew off the jungle gym. But what would I do? I'd look at them deadpan in the eye and I'd say I was run over by a truck and my left arm was torn off. Because that was my truth. Now, after I got used to seeing them pick their jaws up off the floor, the next thing that would happen is they would pause and they'd turn to my parents for validation, which told me what? They didn't believe my story. They didn't believe my truth. They needed it to be validated from an external source. So I remember vividly at age 7 and 8 starting to believe intellectually that the world wasn't going to believe my truth, because even when I present it real time, it always requires another level of validation. And then those same people, brother, would start to view me through their lens of what they'd be capable of in my situation, immediately telling me all the things I was and wasn't going to be able to do for the rest of my life. And though I didn't have these words back then, the feeling is still what I associate with the words I use now, which was fuck that. Right? I'm not going to be contained. I'm not going to be limited by someone else. But I was told at that time, you really need a good mindset. If you're mentally tough, you're going to be able to do this. And so that's what I did. Right? What I didn't realize until years later was I really armored, hid myself, shut off in lots of ways. But my narrative was Brian's good, Brian's strong, Brian's capable, Brian can do anything himself. And then the world added, oh, and he'll ask for help if he needs it. But I didn't have the courage or the vulnerability in many situations to actually do that. And I'll save bits of the story for other pieces if it's relevant. But what I'll say
go for it.
But what I'll say is, and I really want to say this because I think this part's important. What I realized way later is that when I shut off physical pain because it exceeded my ability to cope, I also shut off mental pain, emotional pain, and spiritual pain for 20 to 25 years and didn't know it. So I'm living and existing in only one of the 4 categories of self. I've got a very strong mindset, but the mindset isn't contemplating all the other variables. So I was largely disconnected. I was riddled by shame, right? I was consistently in seek of human connection, but I didn't have a healthy model to get there. So that's what I've spent a lot of my life now unpacking. But it took me a long time to realize that I wasn't feeling anything, right? And I couldn't identify emotion. I couldn't tell you what was going on physiologically because I had Fort Knox at my neck and I lived up here. But I also didn't allow myself to feel so that I could heal. And that's really where it ended up going.
Is that you know, and you've brought this up before, just as I follow on Instagram and I've obviously chatted with you, but unprocessed pain.
That's the trash from the past, man.
That's
That's what
exactly
it
what it
is,
is.
right? I'm known often now as the garbage man because I help people identify and remove the trash from their past that shows up as their biggest problems in relationships, life, business, and health. And we've developed a method called the waste to wealth method with 5 pillars that are guaranteed for any individual or business to identify, remove, or transform the waste and generate as much wealth and growth opportunities as possible that will connect and convert. And the more I've done that, the more I've leaned in. That's it. But that's exactly it. It's the unprocessed, unpacked pain. By the way, it doesn't have to be physical. It could be how your dad looked at you when you were 4 and the associated intellectual and emotional narratives that you carry with that. It doesn't have to be a physical trauma, right? But think about at age 7 when I told you I did not feel seen. I did not feel connected, right? Which meant I did not feel protected and I did not feel safe. So what did I do? I armored up to protect myself.
And then carried that with you throughout the next number of years, which obviously has I don't want to use the word negative impact because there could be some positive impacts that come out of it.
There was a lot of good that came from it, but huge.
That's what I mean. Like there's got to be a lot of negative that comes out of it as well because we're too guarded. We're not sharing enough. We're not putting it out there.
So that's exactly right. And so that's what I ultimately realized. But think about how many people don't feel safe, don't feel protected. They don't feel seen and understood. Their truth isn't accepted. They constantly are misunderstood and they don't feel connected. So then it comes down to the core of the human experience, right? I believe we all want those 4 things. We all want to feel safe. We all want to feel protected. We all want to feel seen and understood. And we all want to feel connected. Here's the reality. These 2 are the ones we want the most, and they don't happen unless these 2 do.
Right.
Okay? So what happens when we walk into an environment and we don't feel safe, we don't feel seen, we don't feel protected? It was you in that room in Dallas, right? We put our armor up to protect ourselves. Now I want you to imagine, again, I'm the garbage man, so I use a lot of trash analogies. You know those 35-gallon black trash bags for the outside trash cans? Hold one up in front of you. Just imagine you've unfolded it. It's flat. You've got it now in front of you. That's your armor. That's your trash.
Right.
Okay. Now, I want you to tell me, how could you expect to connect with your wife, your mother, your clients, your prospective clients, your community, the people that you're leading, the people that you want to lead? How could they know who you are, what you want, your boundaries, what you're willing to stand for, what you're not willing to stand for, your heart, your intent, your desires, all of who you are delivered through an opaque force field? And how could you expect that they're going to properly perceive that? Because they probably are also carrying their own armor that's going to further dilute that message.
Right.
The second we protect ourselves, we disconnect ourselves and guarantee that the 2 things we want most, we won't ever get. But instead, most people learn how to receive love, validation, and connection through performance. If I do this, they'll love me. If I do that, I'll get the attention. I might just get the approval from my parents that I've always been seeking, but I'm never going to get. Like, that's the pattern that we start chasing. And it all is because we're hiding behind that proverbial armor.
You know, it's interesting. I'm watching a show right now called Designated Survivor, and I think it's been out for a few years. Kiefer Sutherland, you know, becomes the president, whatever. Anyhow, one of the episodes, and this is like my late night, like 11:30 p.m. watch once I'm ready to like veg for my hour, right? It ends up watching me anyways, but whatever. Last night there was an episode, and one of the new staff members in there is talking about something that happened to him when he was 10 years old. And it was amazing how he keeps coming back to this story, this event that had happened when he was 10.
Yeah.
And how what they're really saying to you is that's why the guy that you're watching, the character obviously in a show, but that's why the character is who he is because of what happened back then. So then what happens is my mind naturally starts going back to these events of like when we're kids and things that have stuck with us, things that have impacted us and who we are and the decisions we make and how we do. And I've talked about this before. It's like, you know, anybody who, you know, when you had your first love or your first date and all of a sudden you broke up and you were heartbroken, you went all emotional and you sit there 10, 20, 30 years later looking back going, I can't believe I cared as much. But even that set the stage for what the next relationship looked like.
Bingo.
So for everything you're talking about, Brian, man, this took some time because this didn't come to me that day you and I were talking. Yeah. This came to me through learning from you now since we spoke. And then obviously the conversations we've had, but just even following the content and going, I get it. I get it. So as you say that now, let's take this as an action item for anybody tuned in and go, okay, so you're listening to this right now. We're talking about some of the things that you might be carrying with you that maybe you're not even conscious of from back whenever that are potentially impacting who you are, what you do, how you go about now.
Yep.
How could anybody, just in this moment of the show, how could anybody truly dig deep right now to figure that out? is to figure out what's impacting them daily. Because maybe some people are waking up and going to bed and going, I got no problems. There's nothing wrong. I don't have.
Yeah.
We all got something, right?
We all do.
Right? Like
and here's the reality. I have people ask me all the time. They're like, how do I know if I even have trash from my past?
Right. That's what I'm saying, right?
Here's the reality. I've never met a human being who doesn't. And so I'm waiting for someone to actually show up and not have any, because then I could be like, wow, I now have an example. I've not met somebody yet. And by the way, I'm very good friends with some of the world's highest performers. I've coached and worked with some of the highest level people on the planet. We're talking multimillionaires and billionaires in many cases, and they've got more trash than most of us do. Okay? So that's what I really want to say. So if anybody's doubting if you have trash, I'm going to ask you a question. And as I ask you this question, if you feel anything, you have trash. Now, I know that David jumped out real quick because there's been some connection stuff, so I'll keep going, but I want to make sure that he also understands and hears this question. But awareness is the very first step. And so I said I was going to pause because I wanted you to hear the question as well, my friend.
Yes.
If you react to this, if you feel anything to this at all, I guarantee you have trash. Who was the last person that made you feel like garbage?
Are you asking me the question?
I'm just asking the question openly. If you want to play a game, we can jump in on this because we can give an example real time.
Jeez, man. I mean, it's funny. You could start. I guess I'd have to dig for a moment on that, because I think that here. This is the perfect conversation, right? Because I might go, I don't know if anybody made me feel like trash. Maybe I've got my guard up so much that I'm like, I don't allow that to happen. Or as I start to sense it happening, I don't know, but maybe I go the other way. Maybe I change the conversation. Maybe I get combative. I'd have to stop and pause for a real moment here to say, like, who, but then again, I could tell you, like, it could have been that person on the road that cut me off that gave two shits about who I was. And not that I'm more special than them, but they acted like they were more special than me, let's say. Who knows? It could be little things like that.
It's all those things. I've yet to meet a person that when they actually sat with it for a second doesn't come up with an answer, right?
Well, and that's what I mean.
As my mind starts to wheel, I'm the person who made me feel like trash, and they're taking ownership out of the gate, which is cool. But let's just give a couple of examples, right? Yeah. Like, what are moments that might make us feel triggered, that might make us give an example to recognize we might have trash? Well, it might be that night that your spouse mentioned something to you about how you loaded the dishwasher incorrectly, and it causes an internal reaction with you that has nothing to do with your wife, nothing to do with your dishwasher, and everything to do with how your grandpa looked at you when you were 4. Okay? It's those moments. My wife used to ask me a question like this. Hey, honey, what do you want to do with the kids this weekend? But my shame filter would cause me to hear it this way. Hey, honey, you've not done enough to be a good husband and father here recently, so what are you going to do to make up for it this weekend? And then all of a sudden I'd feel that internal reaction, that element of defense that would rise. And all of a sudden I'd rattle off the 10 things I've done in the last 4 days to show her I'm a good husband and father. It wasn't even what she asked, right? It's those moments when you feel like you got passed up for a job or a promotion, or you didn't get the attention from your parents that you wanted, or you're not making as much money, or everybody thinks they're stuck because they have the wrong strategy and tactics in their world. If I just get the right selling system, if I just get the right process, if I just get the right coach, once I make this amount of money. But by the way, strategy and tactics never are the reason people are stuck. They're critically important for leveraging and scaling our lives and businesses. Critically important, but they're never what keeps us stuck. 100% of the time, you are stuck because of the trash from your past that's not been unpacked and not been processed. Now, I have to give a caveat before we say anything further about trash.
Yeah.
The trash from your past is not your fault. It just becomes your responsibility once you become aware of it, or you start burying others in yours. But the reality of it is this generationally patterned. This is inherited, right? A lot of my triggers, a lot of my reactions, a lot of my patterns around shame and anger were actually inherited from my parents. And we've traced, in my wife and my situation, our triggers back 3 generations in our families to be able to understand where they came from, how they got patterned in, and they're cellular. See, we carry cellular memory. And the brain...
This it's not just the events that happen to us directly, but it does have to do with the upbringing, the mindset that was instilled in us.
100%. 100%. Right? Like, here's the reality. My dad was the oldest of 5 boys. In the Martin Luther King era, they were one of 4 families in a 10-mile radius that was white. And he had an alcoholic father that beat the shit out of him, and he took the abuse for all of his brothers and his mom. You don't think that pattern down in moments of anger, associating love with pain? Now, I've talked openly with my dad about this, but my dad never once hit me. So I could sit here and be like, well, my dad didn't pass down the abuse. But the reality of it is a lot of those same patterns and tendencies, even though he never physically hit us, took him years to escape and remove, right? To think that he wasn't impacted by that as an individual, to think that his self-worth, the shame that he carries, the lack of ability to believe that he is anything worthwhile, even as a father, let alone a human being, it's because from the time he was this big, he was told he was nothing. He was a piece of shit, and he got beat the fuck up just because he was there, right? So many of us aren't born. We don't choose the families we're born into. We don't choose the situations we're born into, but we learn to survive in them. Problem is most people learn to make themselves small or hide from them or ultimately numb from the things that give them pain, which means they're not feeling and they're not healing and they're not growing.
And it's amazing because as you grow in age, there are moments in life where you almost look and go, wait a second. Because I know that there's things for me in life that took me time to become conscious of when it comes to, let's say, upbringing. And I don't want to sit here and say I was brought up poorly or something. My parents are amazing. I love them.
I wasn't either. My parents are amazing.
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to knock or bring any negative tone to that and try to like shake it down that, whatever. No, I don't have a rags to riches story. I don't grow up well. Parents gave us everything. Like we did well, right? Not silver spoon. Let me put that out there too. But you know what I mean? That being said, my parents have their way of doing. I know my grandparents had their way of doing. I've watched some of the things that I've done, and I've actually seen some of the things I've been very conscious about not wanting to do anymore, only because I've seen the lineage from both, again, my parents as well as my grandparents to go, I don't like that, and I don't want to do that. But that took time to come around and actually grow up to, mature to, be conscious of, whatever it is.
It does take time. And those unconscious patterns, and again, I'm not going to say this was your situation, but if one sibling was favored over the other, if there were multiple kids and the oldest ultimately had to raise their siblings or be a part of it, like you learned for the first time to get love, validation, and connection when you stepped onto an athletic field because it was the only place that you got praised for anything, right? Elements of control, and you should do this, you shouldn't do that, you should want this, you shouldn't want that. Should's a shame-based word. It implies that whoever you are, whatever you're doing, it's not good enough. Yet all of us are born as our brightest, most authentic, burning self, and then our parents, teachers, employers, and coaches literally layer all those elements of should that start funneling us down into this box based on who the world has told us who to be versus who we really are.
Okay, I got to ask you a question right there because you and I are both coaches in terms of like performance for professionals. I also coach baseball. I also coach hockey. And as you say that, I start to think to myself, do I use the word should? Now, somebody years ago caught me on the word but. Years ago. And I remembered that, and I do everything I can to try not to use it in the wrong context. Then Brad Lee's on the show like a few weeks ago, and I used the word, he goes, what'd you say? And all of a sudden he caught me on the word but and went, shit, right? Like I used it. Is should one of those words?
Yeah. I'm actually on a mission to remove the word should from our language.
Oh, it's so tell damaging. Me more, bro. This is interesting because I've got to start being conscious of that with my kids.
I mean, should's a shame-based word. I mean, here's reality. How many people wake up in the morning and they're like, man, I should have gotten up earlier today.
Holy shit.
Man, I should have worked out more. Man, I should have eaten less. You're shaming and blaming yourself and immediately putting yourself into the lowest frequency energy that exists, right? I believe that there is not a situation that we use the word should that we couldn't replace it with the words could or would. What could you do differently? What would you have done differently? What could you do to learn more? What would you have done had you known this? But should implies that whatever it is, whoever you are, it's not good enough. And oh, by the way, that's based on an external fucking lens, not your own belief system.
Wow.
So how many of us grew up in that situation, which is like, again, I grew up in a household, loved my parents, but there was a right and a wrong way to do everything.
Okay. Yeah, I got you.
Right? So what does that mean? Well, my parents are very OCD. They're very structured. They're very good with their things. Now, Ashley and I, when we start living together, I would sometimes just give advice to be like, hey, have you ever considered doing it this way? Because to me, there was a right and a wrong way to do everything because that was my lens and my view and my belief, when in reality, what she was doing was just fine, but I was immediately shaming and blaming her, even though that wasn't the message.
It's the approach that's taken towards that.
And it comes across as control, right? And all of a sudden she's like, wait, why can't I load the dishwasher the way I want to load the dishwasher? Right? I mean, simple things, right? It's those moments when you see a leader running a business and they're like, man, my teams just don't get it. They just can't seem to grow our business. And it's like 99% of the time, they're the fucking problem anyway, is the leader who's setting the tone, and they're not giving their space, the autonomy, the emotional safety to exist in the space. And in fact, most workplaces are filled with toxic shame. Almost all of them. They're not focused on humanity. They're focused on profits over people. They're focused on what over who. And I just flip that on its head and I say people before profits always, who before what always. Because when we can keep that centered and realize that everything we do involves people, if that's the one thing everybody on this planet studied and mastered was people, human behavior, how do we interact, the human experience that I outlined for you, how to become a protector and a connector, how to facilitate spaces for people to be safe and seen, to show empathy and compassion. Because here's the reality. I had somebody on my show not long ago. He's worth $250 million. At 40 years old, he woke up multimillionaire, realizing he was as empty as his 15,000 square foot house.
Wow.
Right? Money doesn't solve those problems. Don't feel sorry for the rich guy. They can go buy a fucking Lamborghini. But the
dude,
reality
this is like ridiculously powerful. This is good. This is, again, this is bringing even more light to that message of trash, Bri, around this right now, because you're nailing it. Like, and I know you know it. You've been preaching it for some time and teaching on it. I love the message here, though, because it goes so much further than just telling your story. We're talking about human interaction. We're talking about the way we communicate, the way we interact with each other, and everything we do with each other is going to set the tone for both of us in that next step we put in front of our step.
Bingo.
Right? Like exactly that's literally what's coming down right now. This is a paradigm shift in a massive level right here. And everybody tuned in, again, recognize this, is that, again, when you do sit down and you do say things, do things the way you do it, you might mean it one way. The way you mean it doesn't necessarily mean that's the way somebody understood it.
The world will never judge you based on your intent. They will always judge you based on your actions, right? And here's the reality. Our actions can be delivered with a solid intent, but if it's being delivered through our own armor or being received through someone else's armor, again, it's diluted. It's not the real message. How many people walk around and are like, man, my spouse just never seems to understand what I'm saying. My boss never seems to get me. My kids, they never seem to understand. Like, all these times when people are feeling like they aren't understood, when their intent isn't understood, when they're being judged, criticized, and shamed for what they're doing that doesn't align with their own personal view of self, every time that happens, it's because of trash from your past. And so the reality of it is, again, I say the biggest thing that we have to focus on is it's not your fault. The 5 pillars that we run through, I can hit on a couple of them, but awareness is the very first step. But this is not becoming more aware of all the ways that you should be judging yourself, which is what most people do when they go through the self-awareness game, right? They literally go to therapy and unpack why, and then perpetually exist in that never-ending question of why, is feeling more and more sorry for why I still exist this way, versus understanding what to do about it.
I heard your story after we had connected, after we had spent probably a day and a half together. Then you shared the story somehow, and it wasn't just to me, it was to many. I then saw the video that you put up. This was a few months ago now, probably, but you took us to the parking lot.
Yeah.
Dude, I was floored. Like, I was sitting there. I think I watched it a couple times in a row. I sat there thinking, like, I've spoken to this guy. He's got the strength of many under him. Like, he's got this amazing mindset. And to think about what happened that day, and then to look at, you going back there and telling the story, and then the firsthand about your mom. And I sit here again right now freaking out about the whole thing.
Yeah, I'm getting goosebumps as you describe it.
Yeah. And we talk about, like, leveraging that, how that can put up all the guards in the world, can make us feel many different ways, and many of them are not the way we want to. You've taken that entire thing and turned it around through vulnerability, through sharing the story, through learning and empowerment. And again, that mission to help billions of people, it's powerful.
Thank you. I mean, I believe that true strength hides behind vulnerability. And what's really funny is being vulnerable is actually one of the most freeing things for us, but it's one of the things that we're most afraid of, because so often the world gives us feedback and narratives that being vulnerable isn't okay. I mean, we even see it. It's like, show up with a smile on, don't feel emotions, move fast, right? Like, you can't get derailed by life. Like, that's literally the narrative, when in reality, if we just gave someone the space to process and understand what's happening, then they're existing in that space for minutes and moments, not weeks, months, and years.
What if I feel I don't have a story though? What if I'm like vulnerable?
Everybody has a
Vulnerable about
story.
what?
Everyone has a story. And that's what I always have to say about my story, because I didn't say it after I told it today, but it's so fucking important. The number of times I've told my story and then the reaction is like, oh, well, my trauma's not as big of a deal as yours, or my story doesn't even come close to comparing to yours. Yes, I have a unique story, but every single one of you listening to this right now has your own unique story. What's important for all of us is that we learn to be able to pause long enough to become aware of the lessons we can extract from our stories so that we become intentional in how do we apply them moving forward. We all have the ability to do that. And we also all have the ability to tap into other people's stories and their collective wisdom to shorten our own curve to learning, right? We've heard you can hire a coach so that you don't have to pay the dummy tax of all the mistakes that get made, right? You see someone that's where you want to be, and all of a sudden you want to be there. You're going to go shorten your curve to launch by hiring that person to help you, right? But the reality of it is that, yeah, true strength hides behind vulnerability. And we're so freaking afraid to just own all of who we are when, ironically, it's the easiest thing to do.
You know, it's real interesting. I still think for myself, I'm still figuring all of that out. And when we talk about vulnerability, I'm very open with my audience about these things because many of these folks have been with me through my journey over the past however many years. And for those that are brand new, you're tapping into something now. Where we are tomorrow or in a month or in a year from now, my only hope and my only, the focus is we continue to grow and we grow for the positive. That said, the vulnerability and the authenticity and the truth about being us is real important, and being able to be comfortable with that, because you just said it. That's, forgive me the words you use there, but it's the best version of who we are. It makes us the truest version of who we are. It makes people realize that is exactly who we are. So, question of that then would be, what's your take on people? And I say this a little bit harshly for folks that people following like sheeple out of fear of standing out or even standing up for what they believe in. This ties right into this, does it not?
It absolutely does. And part of this is it makes a lot of sense. So I'm going to take this from two different angles.
Yep.
I think one that is as much on the influencers that are trying to create the following in many cases as it is on the sheeple that are following. What do I mean by that? Okay. There are many people in the space today around personal, professional development, business coaching, whatever you call it, influencers that, there's a ton of people out there talking. There's very few with anything unique to say. Okay. So there's that. The other side of it is that many of those platforms are built with the intent to get the sheeple to become dependent on their programs so that they can continue to have the same repeat people to grow their business and do all those things. I have a fundamentally different view. Mm-hmm. I don't want anyone to be like me. I view my job as guiding them to find the best version of who they are, to make as much money as they're capable of making, in living in their power and potential, in living their life on their terms. But it makes sense that people follow to the degree that they do, because again, all the shoulds of the world, we're told that if we're different, if we stand out, we're going to be isolated and alone. So what do? All of those trigger points in trash create intellectual and emotional narratives with which we then further seek to validate through proof, information, and the types of people that we're around for the rest of our lives, putting us into scenarios where, oh, by the way, you look at anything in this world today. I don't care if it's politics or business or religion, or everything is so fucking polarized because people are living in the black and the white, right? Because if I'm over here and I have all these people on this side that have my shared belief, then I'm okay. But if I'm over here, then I'm okay. But the reality of it is there's such a divide between typically both sides that all there is arguing. All there is fighting. When in reality, 99% of the time, the gift is in the gray area, and the gift is through surrender, not through fighting. But that's not what we're taught. And we've actually outgrown our evolutionary need for survival, because 100 years ago, you cut your leg, you could fucking die. Most people in first world countries don't have those problems anymore.
Right.
And the technology, the speed, the access, the way we're actually consuming knowledge, the aggregate amount of data, even thinking about what my kids have access to through the tablets that are highly limited that they use occasionally versus what I had when I was their age.
Yep.
I was operating on an old school Game Boy.
Yeah, bro.
I didn't have the internet. I didn't know what the other side of the world looked like unless I traveled there, right? But today the world is very small, yet people are more disconnected and isolated than they've ever been, even though we have more access to more people across more countries in more mediums than we've ever had before. But what does that mean? I genuinely believe that everybody wants freedom, but it's the scariest fucking place to be.
Dude, but you think about it, right? And this has been a conversation we've had in our groups before, right? Around cancel culture. We both have a good buddy that jokes about it, laughs about it, and literally will go right out on a limb and talk about it. There are other people that want to stay the hell away from it out of what you just said around that fear, around the idea of, do I get into a fight about it? Yeah. Much the same, that gray area where you say is the sweet spot, it's almost as if it doesn't exist because people are so jaded based on what they've learned and they should be thinking. This is the opinion on how they go about it, and they just follow. And that's, to me, where the sheeple mentality comes from. I don't think we need to go to war with you. Well, I don't think we need to go to war with each other over stuff. I also don't think that good conversation and constructive conversation is a bad thing. Yet I think in today's society, it's very hard to have.
I agree, because we're so protective. We're so armored. We're so afraid of what's going to happen because we have been divided. We have been separated in many ways. And I just, this is the way our world has patterned forward. I'm not blaming any one place or another. It's the reality of where we are. But all that said, I'm on the same page with you. I'm like, I can view anybody from any situation objectively and non-judgmentally. And I believe that when I can view someone objectively and non-judgmentally and see them for who they are, where they are, when they're there, then we can have productive conversation, even if we don't view the world the same way. Again, I'm not trying to have people believe and live and exist with all of my belief systems. What I want them to be able to do is to be able to live their lives for the very first time. Most people live an entire life, but they don't ever live.
It's such a different conversation today in terms of digging deep for individuals. Cause in a professional landscape, we help people very much the same from a mindset, a work-life balance, more profitability, a better relationship at home. It's really trying to achieve what is it that you want in your own mind as a next level in life.
Yep.
Part of that is, why do you want it? What are we going to do to get there? Yep. And oftentimes a lot of people are jaded to what other people think they should want or should be. We talk about, why do people want to make so much more money? Because they care too much about what other people might think in terms of the car they drive, the house they live in, the clothes they wear, the vacation spot they go to.
It's about we hear this. What car, what amount of money, bro?
Again, dude,
what's overdue?
Listen, as coach in sports, right? We've got single A, double A, triple A. Joshua happens to play double A ball and double A hockey. As the head coach of the baseball team, could I have registered to take my team to triple A this year? Sure. But the A is just an extra A. It's a status symbol for people. I said to the team, I want W's, not A's. The W's are going to raise the level of confidence in our team, and that's going to help them have more success. And when we do that, they're going to be happier people. And did we not accomplish what we wanted?
Yeah. But here's the reality too. Like, we are built in a competitive environment and society in just about every way. From the time that we're little, we're being ranked. We're being, we've got different levels. I mean, I think back to my wife and her example, right? She was so adamant when she was in high school as to how important it would be for her to be the number one graduating student in her class. And so she took all the AP classes and all the everything. She graduated like a 4.65 GPA, but she was like number 4 in her class. And she carried that weight for years because to her, that was a failure. She wasn't number 1. Oh, she was 17. She just ran in to tell me she was 17. Damn, girl, I wish you would have gotten better. Of number 4, I thought better of you. But the fucking point is, it doesn't really matter, right? Like, in the scheme of her life, what does the ranking in high school really do for her? The top 50 to 100 are going to get into any college they want anyway, as long as their test scores are in line. but yet we force rank it. And we're constantly comparing ourselves against everyone else versus comparing ourselves against the prior version of who we were. Right? Like so many people can't acknowledge and accept the progress they've made in their own lives because they perpetually feel like they're still not good enough. They're still not where they want to be. Where are you right fucking now? Like I've got this saying, be where my feet are. If I can look down and I can maintain presence, by the way, that's also the gift. The gift for every one of you that you can give the entire world is your presence. Pay attention to what's right in front of you.
You know, it's interesting the way you say that. I love that line. The gift you can give the world. Yesterday, two things. One, today's Wednesday. Monday, my daughter brings home her report card. Fucking straight A's. Beautiful.
Oh yeah.
I love it. Straight, like just blown away. I never did that. I was never able to achieve that. Or maybe I just didn't apply myself enough. Whatever. Okay. I probably could have gone to class more too, but that's another day. So she comes home straight A's. Consciously,
you did the best you could at the time, bro. Like,
yeah. Consciously, I will say to you, consciously, I made sure not to over bloat the situation, emphasize the straight A's. Why? Because my son was in the room and we hadn't got his report card yet. So what was important was his is going to come, and he's a bright boy. Lot of A's, lot of B's, ABs. I'm still super happy. Yeah. Now, had I gone off like crazy for my daughter about straight A's, then he comes home with B's. This is exactly what we're talking about. How does that position his mindset? Where does that put him in terms of what he's accomplished? Realistically,
have you read the book Mindset by Carol Dweck?
No.
Okay, read that book and go to page 157. 157 has a breakdown of the language that coaches, employers, and parents use that condition either a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. A fixed mindset is the concept that you're born with everything you're ever going to have, and you're going to be consistently judged based on that for the rest of your life. A growth mindset is you're born with the starting point, and you get to add, develop, and refine your set of skills as you grow, right? But think about that even in the context of grades, because this is a perfect example, right? Yep. Your daughter could come home. Let's just call it a test for now. Like, let's not even call it the report card for a second.
Yep.
Let's say your daughter comes home and she aced the test, right? Now, you could be like, oh my gosh, I am so proud of you. I can't believe you aced the test. That is unbelievable. Way to go. High five, right? But that's actually fixed mindset language, because what does that imply? That if she doesn't ace her test next time, what is she going to get in terms of accommodation? However, if you were to say, hey, you know what? I'm really proud of you because, yeah, you aced the test and that's a really big celebration. But what I'm really proud of is the amount of effort and time you put into studying, because you prepared yourself to ensure that no matter what the grade was, you were going to do the best you possibly could. And for that, I love you and I'm proud of you. Right? It's that artist that early on has a streak and their parents say, oh my gosh, you remind me of Picasso.
Yeah.
And then they stop doing art because if it can't consistently look like Picasso, then it's not going to be good, right? Versus, hey, I really love that you're exploring art and creativity and trying to find a way to express yourself. Some of the greatest minds in the world have been creative minds, and they express it through multiple different mediums. So I just really want to honor the fact that art is of interest to you, and let me know what I can help you do to further condition that interest. Do you see the difference in those two narratives?
I totally see the difference, like completely see the difference. And I think it's important to explain that, because again, that's going to set the tone for what somebody carries with them and the person your awareness they become. Hey?
But the awareness that you had in the contrast and comparison, even between your two kids, that is a moment right there that can create a level of shame in a kid that's unconscious that will carry forward 25 years, right? Your son, and by the way, the same dynamic would happen with my brother and I. I was a straight A student without even having to try. He'd work his ass off and he'd get B's and C's.
That's my daughter. She's like that.
And I don't say that as anything other than it just was what it was, right? Like that doesn't mean anything one way or another. But for him, he was always stacking and comparing himself to his younger brother, who was actually in AP classes in many of the same grades that he was with his friends 2 years ahead of me, right? And what did that do for him? Well, I'm not good enough. I'm not as smart as my brother. I'm not this. I'm not that, right? And I don't mean this to bash on my brother. He's brilliant. I love him. He's one of my best friends. But it's those little dynamics of comparison, whether they're stated or unstated. Your son in that situation, had you not been careful, could have integrated that like, oh man, I'm not a straight A student. I got A's, B's, and I got a C. What does that say about me? Maybe
thinking. That was
your intent was spot on. And that's what I'm trying to say. Like, I'm honoring you for that. But that's how little these things can be, because that moment could have created trash that would have had a ripple effect for 25 years in his life. That one moment.
That's it. Now, speaking of moment, and to what you said about, where your feet are right now, I'll share two things. One, we did our mastermind a few weeks ago, as you knew. We talked about it. We're leaving there, and one of my buddies who came in from the East Coast, who came in to attend as well as came in to speak, Dave, we got to go to the Jays game. And he's, again, East Coast. He doesn't get to go to the Jays game every day like I could if I wanted to, kind of thing, right? Yeah, so, okay, cool. Yeah. Let's go. So we're walking over there, and as we're walking towards the dome to the stadium, he's like, man, I am right where I'm supposed to be right now. And I'm like, buddy, I'm so pumped to hear that. And he starts telling a story about a buddy of his who lives, and I don't remember what island it is, like some Caribbean island, where like one of the things is like when you say like, yo, how you doing? They're like, I'm right here. He's like, do you know what that means? I'm like, what does it mean? He goes, I am right here right now. He says, this is where I'm supposed to be. And so he looks at me and I look at him. He goes, dude, I am right here. He goes, there's nowhere else I'd rather be. Nobody else I'd rather be there with. This is exactly what I want to be doing in this moment. And it was powerful for me. Now, fast forward, and something I've tried to do for myself over just the years, and it's a growth thing. Yesterday, I'm in the hot tub with my wife and my daughter. My son's too cool now. He wants to hang with his buddies, whatever. So the three of us were hanging out. And it's in that moment that I'm looking at my backyard. I'm sitting in a hot tub with my wife and my daughter. And your mind can wander a little bit. But then you got to bring yourself back and say, yo, look what you're doing right now. Like if you were a bird flying through the sky and you were looking down on that moment, you might sit there and go, man, I wish I could be doing that. Yeah. And I don't think enough of us take enough moment or there's not enough conscious thinking, conscious awareness to look at the moments that we get to live, especially those of us in North America who do have clean drinking water, a roof over our head, cars and everything else, and get to be on podcasts and the internet, smartphones, you name it. I don't think we all take enough of those moments to look at the moment and be in the moment.
I 100% agree with you. And here's the reality. It's because our world conditions us to do, right? I couldn't sit still. I had to be doing things. I had to be growing stuff. I had to be adding more stress to my plate. I can tell you, I have missed so many moments in my life.
Right.
But one of the most profound shifts that I've made is this concept of presence. And by the way, it is the ultimate surrender in life. It's the ultimate surrender, because if you can accept that whatever's supposed to happen, wherever you're supposed to be, whatever's going to happen on the other side of this is all about where I am in this particular moment, then if my mind is thinking into the future, or my feelings are existing and hurting in the past, or I'm perseverating in any capacity, anything that's taking me away from this moment, then I'm actually not utilizing what the gift is that's being given to me right now, right? How many times was I on my phone and distracted, and my kids, when they were really little, would be like, hey, Dad, right? I'm never going to get those moments back.
That's right.
I'm never going to get those moments back, but I can create as many of them now as possible. And what I also realize, and this is just the truth, you asked me early in the show, how did you see it? And why did you care?
Yeah.
And my answer was also about presence, because the reality of it is if I'm in this moment, I wasn't with my wife. I wasn't with my kids. I wasn't with any of my clients. I was with you.
Yeah.
So I could
feel that at that moment.
Else, but I wasn't. I was right there. I can look down and calibrate right ahead of me with you right now. Yeah, I've got an intern here in our office. My wife has come in and out a handful of times. But guess what? I'm conscious of the shift around it, but I'm with you right now.
Yeah.
Right? Like I'm nowhere else. I'm not looking at my phone. I'm not looking down at my email. And if we're really honest with ourselves, how often are the people that we love, that we admire, that we are wanting to be around, how many of them aren't actually present with us? Or how many of them are desiring more actual presence from you?
Right.
And then we wonder why we're disconnected.
Well, somebody, I heard this, I don't remember who said this. It might have even been like Brene Brown or something like that. But it was, when you look down at that phone, while you're doing something else with somebody else, you've just told the person that's with you in the moment that they are not as important And so I'll amplify that by saying when it's your spouse and or your children, you have just told them they are not as important.
Yeah.
And that's just something that sticks with me. Because again, this comes right
True,
back
though.
to the shifting, the shaping, the programming of their minds
Yep.
around what I think or what I feel, maybe how they should act later on down the road.
That's right. That's right. That's exactly right. You know, I'll bring you into a vulnerable moment just to even say that presence can be in any given moment, but it can also be just about state and season of life, right? We burned everything to the ground last year because we realized out of alignment we were, and there were some things that happened. I shut down 3 businesses. And I've talked about this publicly. I don't have any shame or anything to protect from anybody ever again. So that's actually a really cool place because I get to just talk openly about stuff. January and February this year were the lowest revenue months I've ever had in 20 years as an entrepreneur. Just a couple months ago.
Do we know why?
Oh, I know all the reasons why, but
okay,
yeah,
cool.
I mean, but the reality of it is it because of where it was at and what my focus was on and what we were rebuilding and where our flow was at. But the point is like that almost didn't even matter because what did matter was this. Over the last 2.5 years since my wife and I unpacked my anger, which I didn't even know existed, we've broken generational patterns in our household. I like to say my wife and I have been together for 17 years. We hid from each other for 14, and she's only felt emotionally safe with me for 12 to 18 months. Okay.
Wow.
When I look at that, my kids are now at a place that they're old enough and have had enough experience in this rhythm. They don't even remember that their dad was an angry person that used to scream at them when they were little. Right? That's a gift that's been given to me. My wife and I have more intimacy, more connection, more partnership in every area of life. Last 6 months just seems to fly by and flow with ease. Until my wife felt emotional safety, she didn't ever really want to be a part of any of the businesses that I was ever running. In the last 18 months, she's fully owned her role. In the last 6 months, she's stepped in. She's one of the best operators, integrators, and executors I've ever met in my life. And she does that so fluidly in our family, but now she's doing it in our business, amplifying our impact. But here's the reality. Here's where I was at in January, right? Because I was still measuring myself based on that external financial number, because we still do, right? Like even when we escape it, even when we fix our relationship with money, there's still a scoreboard in life that our tendency and pattern is to want to compare. So I'm on the phone with a buddy. He's one of the few people that can hold space really effectively for me. And I'm like, man, I just can't like figure this out. I'm like this, I'm that, I'm that. Now his reflection to me was perfect. Something my wife didn't tell me for 3 or 4 months, but didn't resonate from the way she said it. But for him, I received it. And basically what he said is, Brian, all I've heard you tell me is that the life that you've been working for the last decade to build, you're living in right now. The one factor that actually doesn't impact anything that you've just celebrated with your relationships, with your connection, with your fun, with your healing, with your where you're going, none of it has to do with money. Yet you're allowing that one factor to change your perception of where you're at in your life, when in reality, you're living exactly the life you want to be living. And the money is just a byproduct of time, which is the truth, right? Now, what was happening in that moment? I wasn't present in my life because I was stressed about the money and the fact that it wasn't flowing. And guess what? As soon as I cleared the interference on the trash from my past that had to do with my failed relationship with money, and I got clarity through that. Now, are all of our problems fixed? No. But March grew revenue, April grew on that, May grew on that, June grew on that. And we're very clear. And we're actually building a path that's going to change the trajectory of our business with something we're launching in August. So the reality of it is like, we know that was where we needed to be. And my wife and I also have surrendered to the fact that we've never felt financial strain in our business in the way that we did the last 6 months last year. I wasn't sure I was going to make payroll in some moments. I wasn't sure that it was going to have, like, this is all true. But I'd never as an entrepreneur ever experienced that. I've only ever experienced growth.
Right.
Exponential top line growth, because I'm a growth guy. I've always been able to scale stuff. Now all of a sudden I'm sitting in a position where my world seemingly is shrinking, but it's not. The business and the financial elements where my life was expanding exponentially, and now I have space for the money to flow in, and it is, right? But I was not present in my life. I was focused on what money I had made in the past. I was focused on the amount of money I was going to make in the future, when in reality, money wasn't even my fucking problem. But I was making it my problem.
Dude, this needs a to be continued right now. Time is what it is. And I know we both have other things that are scheduled in the day. I would love to get into conversation, and we won't do it now, but around universal law, around what we put out there and how it comes back. I can sit there and double down on what you just said around growth, around mindset, around money. I sit here going like, is this guy like looking at me when I'm not looking or something? I'm telling you, dude, I've been there, done that, in some cases still there. And I have to give a nod to my wife. I am in a very similar boat as you, where so much of what I was doing and what I was trying to achieve was impacting the world around us, maybe not in the best way. And it's not that we fight. We've been very, very tight forever. But that opportunity to grow and have her and leverage her amazing talents by my side to help me get there, before I could do any of that, I had to figure out me. And I will sit here and say that's still an ongoing project, and I think it will be until the day that
it will be till the day you die, brother. It will be till the day you die.
For sure. And that's part of it. That being said, when we do take that and say, okay, money aside, let's be in this moment. Let's understand the impact we have. Let's understand that it's so much more about we need people. How can we impact people? How can I share with people? How can I be the truest version of myself for people? That's where we grow when we get to that next level.
Bingo, brother.
Brian, how do you know it's been a successful day for you? Day's over.
Well, I've got a routine that I do at the
I
end
like
of
how
every
you
day.
laugh at that.
I laugh just because, like, I don't view things through the lens of success and failure anymore. I just don't. I know that might sound crazy, but to answer the question for the nature of what it is and be pragmatic in it.
Yep.
I look at was the percentage of time I spent today in high frequency, positive emotion, flow, growth versus restriction, low frequency, or trigger moments, right? I have focused so much of my life on having the proportion and the ratio be more on the positive side than on the negative, because they're both going to coexist. And so for me, generally, if I can look through the day, I've been intentional with the rhythms that I know are important in terms of giving isolated, directed attention to my wife and kids. I've delivered and shown up in every moment as present as possible with my clients and the ways that I'm delivering stuff. And I was able to move through moments of trigger in minutes and moments versus carrying it forward. Then my process at the end of the day, and it's one that we teach, it's this concept of flipping your lid, right? And scanning your can, right? What does that mean? Flip open your lid and see what's risen to the top. What were the moments you got triggered today? What were the moments you felt defeated, depleted, unworthy? What were the moments you felt resentful, angry, guilty, scarce, controlling, perfectionism throughout your day? Those are all byproducts of shame, because shame is the ultimate wolf in sheep's clothing, and it presents itself as all of those fucking things. But the reality is, if we look at Hawkins' scale of frequency, shame is like a 20, courage is like 2 to 400, right? Like enlightenment's like 700. Shame is the lowest frequency energy that we can operate in, but yet we wake up every morning and say, man, I should have gotten up earlier. Man, I should have done this. If I've done everything that I can do in front of me, and then here's the reality. Did I find ways to be today? Because we just talked about this contrast of do. Mm-hmm. But here's what I've realized. It's not about how much I do, because the more I can be, the more I am.
Ladies and gentlemen, we talked today about how your story will impact millions. And as you tuned in and you listen to Brian's story, you listen to what Brian is sharing with us today around how mindset is going to impact you and the world around you. Being vulnerable, being able to share, being able to be who you truly are is what's going to take you to your next level. Any final words that you want to give to anybody just before we sign off today?
Yeah, I do. What I want to be really clear on around trash is that it's those same moments that the trash was developed that the treasure within you was as well. And often that trash and that treasure are in the same moments. And the treasure is most of the time formed by the trash pressure. So it's not that the trash is bad. It's that you need to learn to identify and remove what no longer serves you, eliminate or remove those pieces that don't, and learn how to transform that waste into wealth in all of the places that your treasure also exists. When you can do that, then you're living congruently with you. And I believe that the greatest amount of resistance and energy drain we experience is a misalignment in intellectual and emotional narratives or in a misalignment or lack of congruence between who we are, what we want, and how we actually show up in the world. And so you are the solution. You are the gift. No one's coming to save you. Nobody's coming to save you. However, you have the ability every single day, if you choose, just like you take out the trash in your house every day or every other day, take out the trash that's been compiled inside. Then you don't carry it forward. It's a lot better life, and everyone's capable of it.
Inspiring, motivating, powerful. Brian, thank you. Thank you for joining me on the show.
Thank you.
Absolutely awesome. You're either listening to this on your favorite podcast platform, you're watching us live, maybe you went to my website, mindshare101.com, and while you're there, be sure to grab your free copy of the Ultimate Marketing Bundle, a 31-page ebook with a 90-day social media content calendar to help you build more mindshare so that you get more market share. A reminder as well, if you want to talk about personalized one-to-one coaching, an in-person keynote talk, or ongoing virtual training, get in touch with my team. We'll set up a consultation call, learn more about what you're looking to achieve and how we are going to help you do just that. Don't forget to leave a review of this show. Very, very simply, you can go over to www.ratethispodcast.com/Mindshare101. We'd be super grateful. Big 5 stars, nice review about how much you love the show. Thank you in advance. Of course, connect with me on Facebook at Mindshare101 and on Instagram at David Greenspan 101. I want to once again thank Kids Keep in Touch Systems as well as REM Real Estate Magazine for sponsoring the Mindshare podcast today. Be sure to visit our website, mindshare101.com, to learn more about what these powerful companies will do to help you grow your business. This has been another episode of the Mindshare podcast. Thank you for tuning in.